I've always considered scary games and spooky games to each be in their own category. Scary games are just straight up jump scare fueled romps or atmospheric experiences that leave you feeling deeply unsettled, while spooky games are more about providing a gothic or creepy look while not really being scary. So let's get started with the spooky license games, which ended up all being kids games. That was unintentional, but let's go. My love for The Nightmare Before Christmas can't be understated. Get that a lot of people think this movie is severely overrated, and I'm not here to argue that, but personally, man, do I got a ton of love for this movie. But I never got around to playing the video game. Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge takes place a year after the movie. Jack Skellington has gone off in search of new frights for their Halloween celebration, but when he comes back, he finds that Lock, Shock, and Barrel brought Oogie Boogie back to life, and Oogie Boogie took over Halloween Town, and it's up to Jack to get things back to normal and defeat Oogie Boogie. Let's start with the positive. The vibes are immaculate. Halloween Town looks great. Exploring it, especially if you love the movie, always gives moments of, oh snap, I'm actually exploring this part from the movie. Whoa! It's kind of like my first time playing Kingdom Hearts, except the whole game dedicated to that. A lot of the music is ripped straight out of the movie and tweaked to fit a more explorative vibe. The graphics and characters also look top notch. The variety in the enemies surprised me too. Going back to the music though, the movie is a musical, and this game decided to take that and keep it for the game. Characters sing throughout boss fights, and most of the songs are from the movie, but this time the lyrics are different and reflect the boss battle situation. And at first it did throw me off and I didn't know if I liked it, but overall I really do think it's one of my favorite things about the game. To see this trouble through. That takes me to the bad. On this channel, we've had games that I absolutely love, games that I absolutely hate, and games that I think are whatever. But this has to be the first time I think a game is boring. I mean, mind-numbingly boring. Forcing myself to keep playing until I can't take it anymore from how bored I am. First of all, why is the loading screen so bad in this game? The areas you explore are pretty small, and there's a loading screen anytime you want to go from one area to the next, which I get, technical limitations. But there's a loading screen when you pause the game, a loading screen when you unpause the game, a loading screen to check the map, which by the way, in order to check the map, you gotta pause the game and deal with that loading screen, which then takes you to the next one for the map, and then the loading screen to exit the map, and then the loading screen to go back to the game, and then all of a sudden the loading screen to go from one area to the next. It bothers you because I already dealt with the loading screens. Stop it! Jack also runs really slow. Like, look at how slow he runs. Like, you have to explore the world with this much speed, dude. You're a bag of bones. You should be so much faster than this. And while sure, the music is decent and the voice acting isn't the worst, there's one thing that really got to me about playing this game. You see, Nightmare Before Christmas is a beat 'em up. Think Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, but way more simplified. For most of the game, you really only have about a handful of attacks. Jack gets this green whip that he uses to fight, and you got your basic combo. A grab that lets you throw enemies into other enemies or slam them down repeatedly. You can kill enemies to collect these pumpkins that work as currency. They allow you to level up your whip or other attacks or buy more items, but you're not leveling it up and unlocking new combos, no. The combo you start with is pretty much the combo you end with. The only difference is that you're upgrading how much damage it does, which can only be fun for so long. You need more combos. You need to slowly see your work paying off by being able to pull off better combos. So when the only difference you're seeing is that some enemies take a little bit less time to kill, it's just not satisfying. And this is what I really wanted to talk about. This is probably one of the most annoying games I've ever played. You see, when you do Jack's grab attack, he announces it, but he announces it every single time.
Toe robber! 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 Toe robber!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
The only Scooby-Doo game I ever played was the classic Night of 100 Frights. It is perfect. No, it's not, but it's a fun time and a surprisingly good licensed game for the time. The standards were honestly kinda high going into Unmasked, and you know what? I don't like it more than Night of 100 Frights, but this is a good game. The story follows Scooby and the gang visiting Fred's friend Jed at a movie studio where he works on monster animatronics. But when they get there, they find that Jed is missing, a ton of animatronics are missing, and everyone at the movie studio thinks that Jed is behind it. So the gang goes on a cross-country journey to track down Jed and see what's going on. that's about the extent that I followed the story, because the story kinda sucks for this one. Or not that it sucks, it's just very basic and uninteresting. I don't think Night of 100 Frights story was anything special, but Scooby being left alone and slowly saving everyone, but they keep finding ways of getting separated and finding each other, it kept things fun and unpredictable. What? Meanwhile, Scooby-Doo Unmasked mostly follows a similar pattern throughout each level, which just makes the story feel like background noise. Explore area, turn in clues that you collect throughout the levels, turn in those clues to the same characters, fight a boss fight, go to the next area, collect clues, turn in those clues to the same characters, move on to the next boss fight. The gameplay itself is top notch, and I might even prefer it just a bit more than Night of 100 Frights. Scooby runs at a decent speed, his jump is responsive and gets a bunch of air while never feeling floaty, the platforming is fast paced and even becomes difficult at times, even if the combat is lackluster. Scooby gets a Crash Bandicoot type spin, which works enough, but you can also unlock outfits like this Kung Fu outfit that lets you just straight up fight enemies. It looks great, and when you're dealing damage it even feels like a decent amount of fun, but it's super basic and clunky, and it's definitely just there to shake up the gameplay in the most basic way. The level designs are pretty great too, and it helps a lot that the game embraces the platforming genre. The puzzles never feel like they drag, and each level is fast paced, including the hectic boss fights that are just as ridiculous as the rest of the levels offered here. Overall, while I still think I prefer Night of 100 Frights more for keeping the overall spooky tone, this game was still a monster fun time and a much needed improvement over Nightmare Before Christmas. The script says a fun monster fun time. I think I meant to put a fun monster filled time. I write these scripts like at 4 in the morning, so I need everyone to just be patient with me. Coraline is genuinely a classic. I always have a hard time understanding people who don't like the movie because it's so well made. It feels so mature for a kid's movie while still staying kid friendly, well, mostly. And it combines just enough comedy and horror and fantasy to have such a broad appeal. I loved it growing up and always wanted to play the video game, but just never got around to it until now. And you know what? I'm disappointed. Coraline mostly follows the same structure as the movie, while adding in a few interesting twists. Let's start with the good. The overall gameplay feels like Silent Hill, mixed with a bunch of minigames. The game is mostly all minigames. I like being able to explore the areas from the movie and seeing how they change from the normal world to the other world. The minigames themselves are varied enough to keep it interesting, and while exploring, you can interact with tons of items throughout the areas, and it's fun seeing what some of them do. But it's also very, very slow. Like, incredibly slow. The movie is pretty slow paced too, but this is like that times 10. For the first hour of this game, you're literally just doing chores. The mini games do become more fun when you're in the other world, and there are these moments in between where Coraline has nightmares involving YB and the other mother, and I think design wise these are great, but gameplay wise they're stale and boring because you're just slowly running from one area to the next. Puzzles aren't fun because Coraline has to drag these boxes around, and she takes forever doing so, even when it's a box that should weigh nothing. And my goodness, does it make these puzzles drag, and sometimes they have you do a puzzle during the day just to do the exact same puzzle during the night, which involves even more slow box pushing. The cutscenes go from normal video game cutscenes to these frame by frame explanations of what happens in the movie, and I hate when licensed games do this. It feels so lazy and cheap, and I get the budget isn't there, but if you have the time to make me do an hour of chores, then you had time to make a couple of cutscenes. Let's move on to the next one. Monster House is another movie that I never get tired of watching. The vibes and story make it the perfect October film for all ages, and I always wanted to play the video game. And while I don't hate this game, it definitely is a clunky experience that I cannot recommend. My first real complaint is that the entire first hour of the movie is explained through photos, and I just said you're gonna get immediate points off of that because I hate that. If you've seen the movie, then you know the scene where they almost get eaten alive in the car. It happens a decent amount into the movie, and that's exactly where the game starts, and it's incredibly jarring. It feels like I'm continuing someone else's save, and I really wish we had the chance to explore the surrounding neighborhood and go through the earlier events in the movie. The controls are actually a plus. If you played the original Resident Evil 4, imagine that, but simplified and more kid-friendly. Monster House is a third-person shooter with tank controls, puzzles to solve throughout the house to open more doors and secret rooms. Chairs and tables and books come to life inside the house, and while I do think this is a creative way to take the action, the combat sucks. Each character has a side weapon, but I never felt the need to use them. DJ, for example, can use his camera to stun enemies with the flash, but the enemies all die so quick, and there's health items everywhere that I even forgot I had this, except for the handful of moments where I accidentally pushed the button to use it. There's a dodge button, but honestly, it's not even a dodge, you just kinda...
Gee-ma-knees!
Oh yeah, The game overall feels super clunky and even kind of fan-made by today's standards, and I mean at the end of the day it's a kid's game. It's not going to be winning anyone over when we have way better alternatives, but it is a fun licensed game that I can see a little kid loving while also being scared of, and I gotta respect it for that. Growing up, Curse of the Were-Rabbit was a must-watch during October, and it still holds up to today's standards. It's the perfect combination of slapstick comedy and kids horror. Curse of the Were-Rabbit, the video game, is not only the best game I've played for this video, but probably one of the best licensed games I've ever played for the channel. I didn't play it growing up, so I have no nostalgia tied to the game itself, and even still, I had so much fun playing this game. The story follows the movie's plot, but it also makes its own changes to fit the video game mold, and I really like the changes. They never feel cheap or lazy, and there's details to everything that you can tell effort went into this game. First of all, there's no little frames explaining the story. You get major points for that. There's this fortune teller character that is used to advance the plot. The villain from the movie plays a much bigger role in the game and gets more screen time. In the movie, there's really no real threat since most of the issue is the rabbit infestation and Wallace who turns into the were-rabbit. But this game ups the stakes by having Victor, the villain from the movie, turn a bunch of animals into were-versions of themselves, like were-chickens, were-weasels, were-gnomes, and the cutscenes are just downright impressive for a licensed game. Some scenes are straight up recreated from the movie, but there's so much new content with new voice acting, and there are some meaty cutscenes. There's another thing about licensed games that I do not like, is when the cutscenes feel super short and rushed just to get through it as quick as possible. Wallace and Gromit has some cutscenes that go on for quite some time, but you get lost in the sauce. It feels like a well-made cutscene. It looks great, it sounds great, and it delivers a fun story that keeps you engaged. The gameplay is also super impressive. Wallace and Gromit is an open-world exploration game where you help the citizens of the town with collecting the rabbits that are running around causing havoc. You can use your vacuum to suck them up and shoot them into these holes, or you can guide big groups of them into the holes. You got time limits to beat, obstacles and puzzles to get through. For example, some rabbits are hidden in certain objects and you gotta use teamwork to collect them. The way you progress is by finishing these missions and being rewarded collected cards. There are tons of cards to collect and tons of ways to collect them. The rabbit collecting missions are one of them, but there's also sports challenges, time trials, parkour challenges, fetch quests, mini games, and tons more cards just scattered all over the map that you have to find by looking around buildings and creatively navigating structures. The gameplay changes so much throughout every mission that I never knew what to expect next, and it kinda kept me hooked. But then there's the combat. I was surprised when the game introduced the combat and was already thinking, oh man, here we go. This is where we get the boring combos that get old way too fast while fighting the same old enemies. Why they have to add combat to this game? It doesn't need it. Turns out I'm an idiot, and the combat is fantastic. Sure, you got your basic combo. The characters use the vacuum, they swing it around to fight, but you got a strong attack. You can mix it with the weaker and stronger attacks together to make creative combos. You can use the vacuum to suck up items throughout the world and throw them at enemies, and then you stun them and you go in for the finishing blow. You can use a combo and then slide to the next enemy while vacuuming an item and shoot them with said item before beating them up. When you defeat an enemy, they drop these sparks and you collect these to fill up these meters, and then you can use those sparks to shoot bigger enemies for big damage. You can also grow your own vegetable, and there's a shop where you can buy items using coins that you find everywhere to keep the vegetable healthy and growing. And this is actually super in-depth too. You can buy pH medicine in case the vegetable's pH levels are too low, a thermostat to change the temperature of the greenhouse depending on how hot or cold the vegetable is that needs to be. You can customize the walls and the floors of the greenhouse. You can beat up the citizens of the town, and Wallace will start freaking out.
Bad. Careful with that thing.
Everything about this game is so much better than it has any right to be. From the music, the voice acting, the gameplay, the story, this has to be hands down one of the best licensed games I've played for a long time, for sure. And yeah, that's about it for today's video. Well, we covered the spooks, the kooks, and the all-out kanooks. Yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you want to like and subscribe. I mean, you know, why else would you do it, you know? Happy Halloween.